Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. My next guest immigrated from Cuba when he was 9 years old and came of age in the flamboyant Miami nightclub scene of the late 70s. As a young gay man in Miami's expat Cuban community, he lived a double life until moving to New York when he was 17 to pursue a career in acting and dancing. In sobriety, he has finally found the career success that eluded him, as well as a sustaining daily spirituality. Won't you please welcome Vincent Castellanos. And I love the war stories, but I also I love the story of a life in the context of recovery. I just think it's amazing. So, what is your name? I looked it up at some point. I did know your last name, but I
hope
don't.
you Googled me so you can get some information, but you probably didn't. I'll be very disappointed.
There is something I do love about the
discovering?
format of discovering it, like the whole thing of not really knowing anything, and then people start telling you their story, and you're like, "What the? I had no idea."
Well, my name is Vincent Castellanos. And I was born in Cuba.
Uh-huh. Oh, wow.
And raised there until I was 9.
Wow.
And then I came to the United States via Miami.
Uh-huh.
Like most Cubans.
Right.
And just my parents and I. I'm an only child.
What year was that?
That was 71 because I'm ancient.
Right.
And so we came, I think it was May 30th, 1971 that we landed in Miami.
And where is my history is not good. Where is that in the context of Castro and the revolution?
Right. So Castro comes in 59.
Right.
This is full on revolution.
Right.
Castro's in power. Shit is bad in Cuba.
Right.
My parents decide they wanted to leave early on,
Right.
and you're not allowed to leave Cuba. And then between 65 and 71, or maybe 60-something and 71, there's a treaty, there's an agreement between the United States and Cuba that if you have relatives in the United States that send you a visa waiver, you will be allowed, a certain amount of Cubans will be allowed out of Cuba per year and enter the United States as political refugees. Right. So we were one of the last families to get out because right after that, it used to call the freedom flights. The freedom flights were canceled.
Oh, amazing.
So I just made it by the skin of my teeth.
Wow.
And so, it was interesting because it was great and it was rough.
Sure.
I knew that I was leaving when I was in Cuba, and I always wanted to, I couldn't wait to go. And then when I left, it was like, wait, what? I'm an only child and there's nobody here, and where are my cousins? Where are my friends? I don't speak this language. What the fuck? And so 5 days after we had landed, my parents got a job. Right. And we had a little apartment, a little studio apartment, the size of this room.
In Miami.
Right. And so they would have to go to work.
Right.
So from 5 a.m. to 5 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday, my mom would leave me 3 little snacks, lock the door. Wow. And there I was at the age of 9.
Wow.
By myself for 3 months.
What were they doing for work?
My mother went to work at a factory sewing, and my father used to build door frames at another factory.
Right. And did they have experience doing this, or what did they do?
Well, my mother was a seamstress in Cuba.
Right.
And my father was he was a big band singer who then was out of a job.
No way.
Yeah. And then he was a barber, and then he was a drunk, and then he stopped drinking, and then he was just a guy who really couldn't keep jobs.
Right.
Very much. My mother was the big, strong.
Right. She was the
hardworking.
Right.
Yeah. She was the anchor.
Right.
And so it was rough. Those 3 months were rough. They couldn't put me in school because it was the end of the school year and they wouldn't take me.
Sure.
So that August I turned 10. And at the end of August, I think, or the beginning of September, I'm not sure, my cousin, it was her birthday. Mm-hmm. And so we went to her party. Mm-hmm. And at that party, my father said to me, when you grow up, you're going to drink just like me, and I'm going to teach you.
Oh, wow.
And he gave me a rum and Coke. And I was like,
oh, my God.
First of all of a sudden, I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't need my parents. I didn't need my grandparents. I didn't need my cousins. It felt great, and I felt like an adult.
Right.
It was instantaneous. I'm one of those alcoholics that the effect of alcohol came through in a powerful way right away. And
and with a rum and Coke. I mean,
Coke.
What a great place to start.
Yeah. And so I was able to drink. My parents would make me drink. Oh, yeah. Moving forward. By 13, I was going to discos.
In Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And what's at 13, you're in 7th or 8th grade. Like, so did you go into school?
So I went to school and I excelled. I was really smart.
Right.
And I would get straight A's.
Yeah.
I was doing the same thing in Cuba.
Right.
So I learned English right away. I was in school. Then I started to get bullied when I transitioned. Back in the day, it was 6th grade, and then 7th grade, you were going to junior high school.
Yeah.
And that's how it used to be.
Yeah.
So when I went into junior high school, that whole year, they were bullying me and calling me faggot in school.
Right.
And it was really hard for me. And so I would skip school.
Right.
I would get on a bus and go to Miami Beach and tan all day. And then I would come home and tell my mother it was swimming practice by the pool. That's why I'm tan.
Wow, right.
And so at that time, I also started going out.
Right.
At the discos.
Right.
And I mean, sex is part of my story as well. So I was already having sex too.
Right.
So I was partying, I was having sex, I was drinking.
Sex with dudes.
Sex with dudes, yeah. And then
And
at the end of
were people aware of that? Like, so when they're like calling you faggot at school, is it because they're like aware of your sexuality at that point, or is it just like your effect, or you're Cuban and you're different, or
no,
thing?
because you have to remember, I was in Miami. We were all Cubans.
Cuban, right?
Yeah. So everybody was Cuban,
Right.
but that's also why I stood out, because I was effeminate and I was really thin.
Yeah.
And I was also like cool, and all the girls liked me because I danced and blah, blah, blah. And I was a straight A student. So the boys would pick on me and they would call me faggot.
Right.
And it was my secret.
Right.
And they were revealing it.
Right.
So it was
God, how horrible.
was like fucking crazy.
Yeah.
So I skipped the entire year. So I failed. And so what happened was I would get the report card every semester, and they would give it to me, and I would take it home, and I would change the grades.
Right.
And gave myself straight A's. But what I didn't know is that the last report card was being mailed to the house.
Right.
So when that last report card got to my house, I had failed 7th grade.
Wow.
So then they put me in a military academy. But it was like some cockamamie Miami Cuban military academy. It wasn't West Point.
Right.
And it was called Inter-American Military Academy. And miraculously, I went from 13, and by 17, well, before my 17th birthday, I had graduated.
Right.
I did 5 years in like 3. I just they kept pushing me, moving forward.
Was it like a boarding school, or was it?
It wasn't a boarding school. I would go home every day.
Right.
And I was also going out.
And was it all boys, or was it?
No, it was boys and girls.
Right.
And again, I was able to be a straight A student. I was always a straight A student.
Right.
Even though I was already partying and drinking.
And what was your first like going out experience? Like, how did you end up in clubs at 13?
Okay,
Like,
I'll tell you exactly.
So curious.
At 13, I was a waiter at Versailles restaurant in Calle Ocho, which is a famous Cuban restaurant there.
Is it related to our Versailles here in LA?
I don't know, but it's like it was probably not.
Right.
But Versailles is still there. It's like an institution.
Yeah.
And so I was working there as a busboy, and there was another busboy who was older than me. He must have been like 18, 19. Right. And right across the street, there was a big gay club called The Warehouse. And he said, I'm going to take you there. And I was like, okay.
Right.
So there's this thing in Florida called quinceañeras, which they have them here too, but the Cubans do it really big.
Yeah. It's
and so
big.
I used to dance on those. I was one of the 14 couples. And my friend was friend with the DJ. And so the DJ and my friend, this 18-year-old guy, took me to the Warehouse for the first time when I was 13 years old. They took me out of the party and went there, and then I would get home, and my parents couldn't find me, and he was like, where have you been? And I was like, I was out.
Right.
And they're like, what do you mean out? So there was like a big fight. But that sort of like set the trend, right? Like nothing was stopping me anymore.
Right.
Like it was like my parents.
And was it a party scene at the Warehouse? I mean, was it like booze and drugs?
Oh my God, it was a disco. It was
like,
a club. Yeah, it was like, I remember like I went in there and it was like, I had died and got to heaven. There was like all these guys, and the music was loud and the lights, and it was dark. And to me, everybody was beautiful. And back in the day, in the 70s in Miami at discos, it wasn't like gay bars now where it's like just men or just girls. It was everybody.
scene. It was a
and the
fun
gay
scene,
clubs were
right.
where the cool people would go.
Yeah,
So it was
totally.
like the super cool vibe. I remember, moving forward, like I was 16 and I went to the poop deck in Fort Lauderdale.
Uh-huh.
And I remember I had smoked pot and I was drinking a beer and smoking a Marlboro Red. So I was like completely high as a kite. I'm 16 years old.
Right.
And all of a sudden, Grace Jones is walking into the dance floor with a lion. And I'm like, oh my God, this is insane. This is like the craziest thing in my life. What the fuck? And so my life was really just about, it's so funny because I was a straight A student.
Right.
I was a valedictorian at my school. I gave the graduation speech. And yet I had this other life where I was doing drugs and alcohol and having sex, and I was able to like maintain it.
Were people aware that you were leading this double life? I mean, was there any?
No, everybody thought that I was like the coolest, best little boy in the world. I was such a deceiver.
Amazing.
It was so good. It was so funny because I have this my take on lies now, especially when you're a really, really great liar, is that you never get away with lying. Like lying is just a fantasy.
Right.
Because even if people get away, you get away with lying to people and they believe you. You never get away with it. You always know the truth.
You're lying to yourself. And you know that.
And so I was so proud of, before I knew that, I was so proud of being this master liar, manipulator, cheater dude that could do anything. So by 19, I'm in New York. I'm in Miami now, and it was before the 3-strike law. I've had 5 DUIs.
Wow.
I've totaled 3 cars.
Jeez.
And I'm 19, right? But now I'm doing Quaaludes and doing acid. Now it's escalated. And I decided I have to move to New York because you don't have to drive.
What about college? Were you?
So I went to college, and I was like, yeah, no.
Right.
I started dancing and acting. In Florida, in Miami, and I was doing really well.
Right.
And then I shot this. I went to. I moved to New York at 19. Oh my God! I just remember this. There was this disco in Miami called Salvation, and it was like a Goodwill or something. It was like a gigantic, gorgeous building downtown. They converted it into a disco, and they had these giant speakers that were like 2-floor high and big holes in it. And I used to trip on MDA and acid, and I used to get myself, I was really skinny, get inside the speaker. And then my other friend would stand outside and he goes, hey, you want to see Vincent inside the speaker? Give me $1. And then we would make all this money. And then in that same place, they had a second floor, like a little mezzanine that looked over the dance floor. And I got up there and I jumped into the dance floor. And I didn't hurt myself. I didn't get to the ground. They held me. It's like, I mean, people like caught me, and oh my God. And then there was this one time they were playing that song, that Rod Stewart song, If You Think I'm a Body, and you think I'm sexy. Okay, so I'm wearing these super tight pants, and all of a sudden this other guy, Jose El Negro, he was like this character, and I decide that we're going to change outfits. So I take off all my clothes. He takes off all his clothes.
You're naked.
And I put on his clothes, and he puts on my clothes. And so that was my life. I was like 17, 18, 19.
Really fun.
Then I went to New York, and it was like even more fun, you know? And
so you get to New York. What year is it?
So now it's 1980.
Right.
1980, I get to New York. Studio 54 is reopening. And so my best friend and I, my roommate Albert and I are trying to get into Studio 54, and we can't. It's like a madhouse. We're going through the front. We can't go. And my friend Albert, either him or I say, oh, there's a back door. Let's go to the back door. So we go to 55th Street. I'm sorry, to 53rd Street. And indeed, there was a back door. And we're standing there, and suddenly the door opens, and people are coming in with ice. And we just come right in. And all of a sudden, we're at fucking Studio 54.
That's
I'm
amazing.
19 years old. We're tripping on mescaline, I think it
Right.
was. And there's Debbie Harry, and she's dancing right next to us. And I say to my friend Albert, I got to touch her. I got to touch her. So I like come really close, and I'm like rubbing elbows with her as she's dancing. And this was like a highlight of my life.
Sure.
I was like, oh my God. And so this is what drugs and alcohol did for me. It created this false sense of highlights in my life.
Sure.
Right? And then I discovered Fire Island,
Uh-huh.
you know, and then I was a really bad hustler for a minute. And so I don't know if I can tell the names of the people, but anyways, so I was at the time Cher's lawyer, and I was not dating him. He picked me up at a bar and he took me for a weekend to Fire Island
Right.
and paid me. So
Right.
dating.
Yeah.
And so he had to go back into the city because
Who
there was
is
an
he?
emergency. I forget his name.
Okay.
This is like
Right.
this is like 1981.
Yeah. No, I
This is
didn't
like
mean. I thought it was
82.
someone anyway.
No, this is like, I don't even know the guy's
Right.
name. The guy could be dead or he could
Right.
be standing right in
Yeah,
front of
yeah.
me and I still wouldn't know who he
Right.
was.
Sure.
There's a lot of those
Yeah.
in my story. And so he takes me to Fire Island. I had been there once before. Now, Fire Island, the Pines in New York,
Sure.
if some people haven't been, it's an island where there's no cars, no traffic lights, there's no transportation. It's just, you walk everywhere. There's boardwalks, water on one side, beach on one side, bay on the other. And it's this beautiful jungle filled with these upscale homes. And it's amazing. Back in the 70s and early 80s and even late 80s, it was a real place of debauchery. There's many islands. The Grove, Cherry Grove, and the Pines are the gay ones.
Right.
And the Pines is known for like gay mecca,
Right.
nutty.
Right.
So he leaves to go back to the city,
Uh-huh.
and I stay in the house by myself, and I'm tripping on acid. So I'm putting Ben de Soleil in my body, my entire naked body, jumping in the pool, running in front of the mirror, and seeing how like the water and the oil together bubbles up in my body.
Right.
And I'm like freaking out. I keep doing this and doing this. I run out of Ben de Soleil.
Uh-huh.
So I put on my sneakers and I walk to town to buy more Ben de Soleil and back naked. Nobody says anything. It's Fire Island.
Right.
And here I am naked walking around Fire Island. Now I'm back home. You know, it was also during that time, it was also where the underwear party started in Fire Island.
Right.
And I was at the first one. So anyway, I ended up going to this party the night before with this lawyer before he went back into the city.
Right.
And that's when I had done mescaline before,
Uh-huh.
but that was the first time that I actually did acid.
Right.
Because I went to this party with this he's dead, so I can say now, at Sylvester's house.
Uh-huh.
Sylvester was a singer back in the 70s, a really famous singer.
Uh-huh.
And Cher was there, and she was dating a rocker at that time.
Right.
And that rocker was the guy who gave me my first hit of acid.
Right.
And so it was like this incredible moment in my life. And then my life just really became about getting high and doing drugs and drinking. But see, I never associated drinking with being anything other than what everybody did.
Right.
I knew that doing drugs was like bad.
Right.
And it was like a secret. And it was like, it's sort of like I felt shamed about it.
Right.
But alcohol was like, no, you just,
Yeah, I mean,
Everybody
your
drinks.
dad's giving you a rum
right.
and coke.
He
at
taught
10
me,
years
right.
old.
And it was, it was a thing that
normal.
everybody drank all the
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
everywhere. Drinking is acceptable, and it's like, it wasn't ever an issue. And then that escalated. I mean, and it got dark, man. I would like leave my apartment in New York on a Friday, get dressed really cute. And so like, I always held a job. I
Right.
always had a
What
job.
were you doing for work?
At that point, I was studying acting, I was studying dance, and I was a waiter.
Right.
And I was doing plays, and
Right.
I was a waiter. I was doing okay.
Yeah.
But I would go out of my apartment on a Friday thinking, I'm going to have a couple of drinks, I'm going to meet somebody, I'm going
Right.
to get laid. And then I would be coming out of a blackout in Philadelphia on Monday. Like, how did I get here? Or I would come out of an 18-wheeler, underneath an 18-wheeler on the West Side Highway, like on Sunday morning, naked. Like, there's my clothes, there are my shoes. Like, what happened? You know, so the blackouts became like a real thing that I eventually got comfortable with it.
Right.
And so if I got home and I knew how I had gotten home and all my clothes were there and my wallet was there and everything was like in one room, then it wasn't like, it was like a total, like a fine night. It wasn't like a big deal.
Like, it's all right.
But how often did I wake up and it was like half on the hallway, half on my apartment, and you know, and then it escalated. I mean, it just like I used to get in cabs and like start talking to the cab driver so that I could pee in the back because I couldn't hold it.
Right.
And then eventually I was peeing my pants.
Right.
And then eventually I couldn't hold my bowel movements.
Right.
And then eventually all that fun stuff that drugs and alcohol used to do, wasn't doing it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and all of the dreams that I had, all this ambition, all these goals that I had, none of it was worth it. It was just like nothing was working. I couldn't achieve anything. And so I quit my job. The last job that I had, drunk, was I started running nightclubs and restaurants in New York, and I was running a club called Tattoo in New York City. And
what year is this?
This is now 1994.
Right.
Because I got sober in 94.
Tattoo. Where was Tattoo?
52nd in Lexington or 50th in Lexington, Upper East Side. Very posh.
Yeah.
And I was running it. I ran it for 2 years, and I would, you know, like so much. By now, I'm doing so much cocaine. I'm bleeding from everywhere. Can't control my bowel movements, but I'm keeping the job, right?
Right.
And I would do things like take my clothes off in the VIP room and dance on the dance floor. I mean, it was insane.
And that had been kind of your gig, running like a nightclub sort of.
I graduated from waiter to manager to consultant to running nightclubs.
Right.
So I quit this job.
Yeah.
And I went to Italy for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back, and I'm walking in Chelsea now. It's like November-ish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm walking in, maybe it's even early December. I'm walking in Chelsea, and I run into my friend Michael, whom I've known from Fire Island. And I'm like, no, because, you know, I went to Italy, and I'm sober now because I just drank wine in Italy, and then I only blacked out once in Florence, but, you know, I'm sober. And he goes, Queen, that's not sober. Sober means you don't drink anything. And I was like, well, I might be sober for you. But not for me. So I kept going. And then that December, my best friend in the world, Rita, my soulmate, my ride or die, she's still the most important person in my life today. I met her when she was 17 and I was 19 when I got to New York. We'd been brother and sister our entire lives. She had her first daughter, Sophia, Sophia's going to kill me. I think it's in April. I just got off the phone with Sophia on the way here, actually, because Sophia's now 25. And she's here working, and she's the pride of my life. But so Sophia had been born in April. So now it's the holidays. It's December. I'm in the Hamptons at Rita's house. And I hadn't dare to carry Sophia. Because it was too fragile.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was going to fuck it up.
Yeah.
Because I by this time, I'm so riddled with shame and fear. And for 2 years now, I don't want to do this anymore, and I have to, right? Yeah. I've lost all sense of like what's real and what isn't. I'm hearing voices. I can't control my bowel movements. I've now dropped and cracked my head open twice. It's bad news, right? And I don't know what to do, so I know that I have to die.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't carry her. And Rita said to me, it was Christmas Eve, and she said to me, there's a picture of this actually. I'm wearing a robe. I just came out of the shower. I'm wearing a white robe. I used to have long hair. It was all wet. I'm sitting on the floor. She goes, you're going to carry Sophia today. And I sat on the floor. Because I said, okay, I'll do it on the floor. And I sat on the floor and I put my hands like this. And she put Sophia on me. And for the first time, I looked into her eyes. And all I saw was this like innocence, this purity. And I felt so dirty and shame. I felt so horrible.
Yeah.
And it had an impact on me in a weird way. I was like, what the hell?
Right. That's so wild.
But I knew that I had seen like, in hindsight, it was like I saw love or light or whatever, you know, for the first time. So I gave her the baby back. And then that night, I'm like dripping blood onto the soup at dinner. And then the next morning, I'm like, I gotta go. And I go into this binge for
Really?
Yeah, I go into this I go back into the city and
I'm
I go
gonna kill myself.
party it up.
Right.
And I'm doing lots of cocaine and drinking, and I bring this guy home, and I come out of a blackout, and I'm beating him with a belt.
Right.
With a belt buckle, actually.
Yeah.
And for some reason, out of the blackout, his screams snap me out for a second. He leaves. In this 5-floor walk up, the windows are open. It's now December 26th. The windows are open. The stereo's on. The phone is ringing off the hook. Back in the day, there was machine. And I'm lying on this white couch. I'm naked. I'm freezing. And I'm also catatonic. I can't move.
Right.
The only thing I can move is my eyes.
Right.
And this goes on. And I'm like, fuck. And I can't. And I'm like, it's horrible. And, I said what I have said a million times. God help me, whatever. You hear it in AA all the time.
Yeah.
People say, oh, God help me. And then God help me. I don't know. I said it. And for some reason, at some point, I was able to move again. And it's now December 28th. And I picked up the phone and I called my friend Alex. Alex used to work with me at Tattoo, that club that I was running.
Yeah.
And Alex had gone to AA a month before.
Right.
And in that month, I saw that the white in her eyes were white.
Right.
I saw that when she spoke to me, she looked me in the eyes and it was in complete thoughts, beginning, middle, and end. And her head was like right above her shoulders. Like it wasn't dropped. And it wasn't way back. It was like right there. And so I called her and I said, listen, I need to go to that place you go to because I need to clean my system and I need to learn how to drink. And she was like, great, fantastic. Sure. I was living on 16th and 5th, and she goes, there's a meeting down the street from you at Perry Street.
Right.
And I went to Perry Street that day, December 28th, 1994. And I sat there. It was a horrible room. It was tiny and it was cramped, and you could smoke at meetings back in the day, and it was filled with smoke. And I hated everybody that was there, and the only seat was against the wall. And I got there and I leaned my head and I just cried for an entire hour. I guess I must have cried for like the first 5 years in AA. And I left that meeting. I don't know what was said. I don't know who spoke. But I left that meeting and I called Alex and I said, I want to go to another one.
Right.
And then I started going.
And at what point did you realize that sobriety meant not drinking at all? Did you stop then? I mean, was that the end for you? Or?
There was a day.
Right.
It was my 43rd day, because in New York you count days. I am Vincent Alcoholic. I'm day 42, whatever.
Right.
Day 43, I was at a meeting, and I was really rambunctious and a little violent, and I used to kick chairs at meetings and yell at people and tell people to fuck off. And I said, fuck you. You don't know me. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what I am. You don't know who I am. And at the end of the meeting, fucking stay away from me. And I got all angry. And at the end of the meeting, a couple of people came up and he goes, wow, man, you sound great. You're right on time. And I was like, fuck you. But then they said, do you want to go have lunch?
Right.
And I said, yes. And so I was like, okay. And that night, for some reason, I woke up in the middle of the night and I realized, this shit is one day at a time for the rest of my life.
Right.
I don't know why that hit me.
Right.
But it hit me.
Sure.
And so I started fighting back.
Right.
I was angry and I was loud and I was obnoxious and I was in your face and I was rude and I was not listening, but I was staying sober.
Right.
And I kept doing this and I kept fighting and I kept doing it. And so there was a kindness that was coming my way, and there was an acceptance that was coming my way that
Despite
I
your
never,
bad behavior.
I was being a monster and people were like, oh my God, you sound great. Oh my God.
wild.
Yeah, you're right on time. I was like, what the fuck does that mean, right on time? And something happened that was more
That's amazing.
powerful than I was. And it's coming up on 25 years in December.
Wow.
My sobriety date is December 28th, 1994.
Wow. Amazing.
And it still is.
Yeah. And so then what happened after that?
So then what happened was Remember I was telling you that I was really good at things, but I couldn't get a break. So back in New York, you used to be able to freelance with agents. As an actor, you could have like 3 or 4 agents freelancing.
Right. Yeah, sure.
And so I get a call from one agency, and I'm like, fuck, they're going to drop me.
Right.
And now it's January. I've been sober for a month.
Right.
And they say to me, listen, we believe in you. We think you're a great actor. We get great feedback.
Right.
But you don't show up to auditions. And sometimes you show up and you tell people to fuck off. But we know that you're really talented and we want to work with you, but you have to promise us that first you're going to sign with us and work only with us alone.
Right.
And that you're not going to do that anymore.
Right.
And so, of course, it was like, here comes the waterworks, and here comes like. But at this time, the waterworks were real.
Yeah.
Because now I'm like a little over a month sober, and I'm sober enough to know that I was crazy and fucked up, and I don't want to be that guy anymore. So I apologize. They accept, and I start going to auditions, and then I go to this audition, and I book my second big movie. I had done Carlito's Way.
Oh, right.
And now I get cast in The Second Crow.
Right, sure.
And it's a big movie. I get paid more money than I've ever been paid before in my life. And at 9 months of sobriety, I am flown to LA for 3 months to shoot this fucking film. And I'm like, holy shit, this is it.
Right.
This is sobriety. You get sober and you become a star in Hollywood. That's what happens. And dude, just like that day when he came to me that it was one day for the rest of my life, we're doing night shoots. We're under some bridge in Los Feliz or downtown or something. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking up to this guy. By now my father is dead. And I'm thanking my father and I'm thanking God and I'm saying, thank you so much. I finally made it. This is so great. And this thing came through me like, but none of this will keep you sober.
Right.
None of this is about you being sober. And it was like, what?
That's interesting.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
And so I moved on and I kept on going. But something came through. Like I heard it.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't understand what it meant, it's taken me years to find out what that meant. I heard it. And so I had a career. I had a career for like 8-10 years. I did Anaconda, Mulholland Drive, and I did a whole bunch of movies, lots of TV.
Amazing.
Really great,
Wow.
really great.
Yeah.
Sober, great life.
Living in LA the whole time?
Living in LA the whole time because after The Crow, they were like, you got to come back. So then because of The Crow, I got this manager and this new agent.
Right.
And they were like, oh, we're going to make you a star. And I'm like, okay, you need to come back. And I was like, okay.
Amazing.
But it was the best thing I ever did because sobriety in LA is incredible.
Yeah,
and it's very solution based.
Yeah.
And it's allowed me to be the man that I am today.
Right.
And so my journey just continued, and it's like, I haven't had a linear life. I've been an actor. I've not been an actor. I've reinvented myself a million times. Currently, I'm not really an actor anymore. I do translations and I'm a corporate trainer. But what's different today is that I know exactly who I am. I have complete control over my actions. I'm not prey to alcoholism, obviously.
Right.
I'm not prey to fear and resentments because I have tools to deal with all that.
Right.
And I am able to participate in my life. People say my life is their lives are beyond their wildest dreams, but I never dreamt this.
Yeah.
My dreams were different.
No, I get that.
So my life is
amazing.
different from my dreams. I never anticipated that I would be this. First of all, I thought I was going to die young because
Sounds like you almost did.
Yeah. And I did a couple of times. Almost did a couple of times. But I made it. So it was never like living to be 50. I'm 58 now. Living to be 58 was like not in the cards. It was like, no. I just realized I haven't given you a chance to ask me a single thing.
No, I haven't really needed to because it's been pretty compelling and it all made a lot of sense to me. I'm sort of curious. I guess I got a couple questions I'm curious about. Like, I'm trying to think where to begin. I mean, What about your like sexuality coming from, you know, a Latin American culture and
Right.
moving to Miami? Was that a factor in your like? Was it hard like coming out to your family, or did
Yeah, no, absolutely.
do
The way
you think
that
it played a role in your your alcoholism, or
I'll tell you exactly how I came out of my mother, which is a whole other story. But yes, I hid it. Alcohol and drugs helped me hide it.
right?
I
Yeah,
say,
that's
when I
interesting,
speak in
sure.
AA, I say that alcohol and drugs saved my life.
Right.
And they did.
Yeah.
And by the way, drugs and alcohol were great for many, 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 many years. It really worked for
Right.
a long
Sure,
time
sure,
until
sure.
it didn't. Then when it didn't,
Yeah.
it was devastating.
Yeah.
But the way that I came out, it was like I had graduated high school. I'm now 17 years old, and I decided I'm going to kill myself. And so there was this high rise in Florida. It's like 7 buildings.
Right.
7
Seven
stories.
stories.
There was this high rise being built 2 blocks from my house, and I decided to leave a note and go jump.
Right.
And I go and I get into this like the makeshift construction elevator.
Right.
And when I walk into the elevator, there's 2 ladies in the elevator, and the elevator gets stuck. And so there I am, taking the elevator to go to the top floor to jump
On your way
to
to
my
your
death.
suicide. Yeah.
Right? I'm on my way to kill myself. And these ladies are like, and I'm like 17 years old. They're like, "Hi, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm doing a school project on architecture, and
Right.
I'm coming to take some, get some pointers or whatever." And they were like, "Oh, great. Well, we're from the whatever board, and we can help you." And da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, "This is not
nightmare.
happening." And so we're there for like 2 hours. The elevator starts to move. Eventually, the elevator starts going. The doors open. They go one way. I go the other way, and I start to walk to the edge, and I can't make it to the edge.
Right.
So I run back. This time I run down the stairs. I run downstairs, go home, go to my room, lock the door, and go to sleep.
Right.
And then I hear this banging on the door. It's my mother.
Right.
I open the door. So what I have forgotten to do was to take the letter
Take the
back from the
notes.
table. So she had read it.
Oh God.
And she went into this, typical, I don't want to say typical, but maybe
Right.
definitely typical of my mother. How could you do this to me? You're killing me. You can't tell your father.
Right.
Blah,
Really?
blah, blah.
Oh my God.
This is
That's
like,
brutal.
you could, we got to change this from you. We're going to, change you. You can't do this. This is not the son that I gave birth to.
Right.
It was
Oh,
just horrific.
God. Wow.
And here I was just trying to commit suicide. And my mother is like making it
Mother's
all about her.
You should have. Why didn't you
Wait,
go through with it?
It gets better. She leaves the room and there's complete silence. I'm like, what the fuck? I go outside after a while. I'm like, Mom. She's not answering. I come outside from my room and there's my mother on the couch, fainted. She had fucking passed out. So now it becomes all about like reviving my mother
right.
and apologizing for being gay,
my
which then set the
God.
tone for my life. You know,
Right,
it just
right.
now there's shame and then there's guilt. And
God, that's
it was
terrible.
like a big secret that really wasn't a secret. It was part secret, part out. It was just confusing, and thank God for drugs and alcohol that allowed me to get through it.
Did you ever come out to your father, or was it a? Or
And so
he,
when I was that same year,
right.
I started dancing, which was okay because when I came from Cuba and I had a little bit of a nervous breakdown when I was 10.
Sure.
Because I freaked out being alone in this apartment.
Yeah.
And so my parents enrolled me in a folklore dance company.
Right.
And so I started doing folklore dancing. But when I was like 15, I wanted to study ballet, which was like, no,
Yeah.
you can study folklore, but not ballet. Ballet's for faggots.
Right.
And I was like, so I started doing it,
Right.
because nobody ever told me, if you say no, I was like, really?
Right.
And then I would do it anyway.
Yeah. Thank God.
So I do this recital at the University of Miami Amphitheater outdoors, and the company was me and 10 girls.
Right.
So I come on stage. There's a picture of this, and I'm on a unitar. I'm 17 years old in a unitar, white unitar, with these 10 girls like in a pose towards me. I'm like the god. And I come out and all I hear from the audience is maricón, maricón, which means faggot, faggot. And I look and my father's standing right there, dude. My father is standing right there.
Right.
There were flyers.
Did you know he was going to be there?
No.
Right.
He didn't even know. I didn't even know that he knew that I was dancing, and I don't think he didn't either. But there was a flyer, and he found it, and he showed up. And I saw my father, and I was like, you know what? It's going to be the best performance of my life.
Wow.
And I do this show.
Who's yelling maricón?
People in the audience, other kids in the audience.
But they've just come down there to torture you?
Well, it could have been me. It could have been another guy. It could have been any boy who's dancing ballet.
Yeah.
You know, like we were talking about the Cuban culture being in Miami. Yeah, it's like, but it's not just the Cuban culture. It's kind of like the culture across the board.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you're closeted or you're intimidated.
1971 or whatever.
Now this is like 78, 79, and it's like being gay. It's like bad news, right?
Sure.
So I do the show. I'm coming out from backstage. I now have a car. I'm 17, and I'm walking towards my car, and I see my father. And I walk towards my father, and there's tears rolling down his eyes, and he opens his arms. And he says, you have a gift. You must never give up. Opportunity will knock.
That's
many
amazing.
times. You must always be ready. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And I moved on.
I mean, who would have thought that, like, your mother's like, you can't tell your father, and then your dad has that reaction.
Right. And
That's
I still
amazing.
never told him. By the time I get to tell, but he knew. By the time I get to tell him, he had Lou Gehrig's disease. Right. He can't speak anymore. Right. And I tell him that I'm gay, and he just puts his arm up. He's crying again, and he hugs me, which led me to believe that he knew all along and that he was okay. So we had that moment.
But I mean, he was a big band leader. I mean, like,
exactly. And
like,
he had been raised in whorehouses.
Like, he's been in the.
He left his house when he was 9 to go sing in his brother's band.
Like,
he used to put him on top of a chair so he could reach the mic. I mean, he was the guy. He knew the shit. He's my hero.
That's
you know,
amazing.
I love my dad. He was amazing. So cool. Yeah.
And then this is a less interesting question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, which is just like, now you're in Hollywood, like the dreams are happening, you're sober. Was that a challenge to then go through that life of kind of like parties and the Hollywood life and maintain your sobriety?
No, and there's a couple of things about that. So I was a working actor for the first 8 years of my sobriety. And so I had that life and the parties and the thing and the premieres and all that stuff, right? But there were two things were happening. One, I think the most important one is that once I came into AA, that desire to drink and drug, like went away. I'm one of those. Right. I mean, I know a lot of people who are like 30 years sober, 20 years sober, 10 years sober, and they still have to fight it.
Right.
My shit was gone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could be in a place and be okay. But what happened to me was that I was always cast as the bad guy. So I was playing murderers and rapists and drug addicts and drug dealers and killers. And so those were the roles that I was doing. And so it was beautiful because I was able to exercise all that anger and all that rage that we usually feel in early sobriety. Sure. So it's almost like I got paid and had this license to go as dark as I could and then darker and prayed for it. Right. And so I would leave it all there. Right. You know, and then I was able to have this like great life. I mean, when I stopped acting, it's really when my journey into like true sobriety began in terms of like discovering who I really was, you know, and that wasn't until I was like, I did the steps with Clint Hodges when I was 10 and that revolutionized my life. I had worked with Scott Redmond prior to that who introduced me to the inventory process and that was really revolutionary. But then working with Clint, he introduced me to a God of my own understanding and the combination of those two has really been the key for me to, you know, one of the things that I say when I speak often is like, you know, sobriety is the process that allows me to reveal myself to myself. Right, sure. Over and over and over again. And just because I'm 25 doesn't mean that I'm completely revealed to myself. Sure. I'm pretty good, but there's always more to reveal myself.
Well, that's exciting too.
Yeah, and it's in the staying sober for me and doing the work that allows me to do that, especially the inventory. I think the inventory should be taught in school. for children. This ability,
Totally, I totally agree.
Yeah,
with you.
this concept of taking accountability and responsibility for your part in anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the other person is that wrong. It just means that you get to see your part. So I get to change something about me as opposed to insisting on you changing.
Yeah.
It's revolutionary.
Yeah.
And it's changed my life.
Yeah. How did we get to that? Did I just ask you?
You just asked me, how did you get into what you're doing now?
Yeah. So how did you become? Yeah. So what is it how do you describe it?
So right now what I do is I'm a translator. I went back to school. I became a translator and interpreter at UCLA. And then I'm a translator and I translate foreign film and TV into English dubbing scripts.
But
I'm also a corporate
doing
trainer.
This style thing.
Right. So the way that I became a corporate trainer.
How'd you become a stylist?
Oh, because my mother was a seamstress
right.
in Cuba and my father was a big band singer. So what my parents gave me, they gave me many things, but some good, some bad, some of the great things they gave me was real good social skills and a great sense of style.
Which I admire your hair very much.
Thank you. So it's big hair. So
does it naturally stay up like that?
Dude.
Or do you have to do something to that?
Right. So this is just
because I have similar hair, but mine won't quite stay up.
Yeah, just let it. Is it dirty? Just don't wash it.
I never wash it.
Right. But it's your hair and my hair is the same thing.
It's
pretty similar.
Not dissimilar. Yeah.
Except you have better one because it flows. Mine just goes right up. But anyways, see, grass is always greener. Well, not always. Anyway, so. From a very early age, okay, for instance, the first time that I bought clothes in a store,
right,
except for shoes, was when we came to the United States because my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt would custom make all my clothes in Cuba.
Right.
So I was raised with a sense of style. Right. And so I had reinvented myself a couple of times. I had opened a business in, was it 2000 I don't know. I can't. I'm not linear. Anyways, I'd opened an event design company, and 8 months into it, the economy crashed, and I was like out of a job. I had to close my company, and my buddy who owned a store, side of war, said, "Why don't you just come in and help with the windows?" And I started doing that, and then one day it's like, "Why don't you help this guy? I'm super busy," and I started helping him. And so I became a stylist. And the reason I did is because I would do it with all my friends all my life.
Yeah.
So it was second nature. But then the way that I became a corporate trainer, which is what I do now as well, is that 11 years ago, a friend of mine called and said, "Hey, listen, I have a couple friends in Austria and they're coming to LA and one of them is turning 40 and the husband wants to buy the husband a makeover and a new wardrobe." And I said, "Are you interested?" I said, "Yes." So they hired me. I worked with this guy for 2 days.
You take him around to stores or did you shop and bring the stuff to him?
No, this particular guy, I took him around for 2 days.
Fun,
and he was like, kind of like nerdy and really brilliant and very quiet and not a real strong sense of style. And so after 2 days, he had a whole wardrobe. He had a great sense of style, and he had kind of like opened up, and he was like a little bit more in his body. And that was the end of that. It ended. He went his way. I went mine. Friends on Facebook, whatever. Come February, a friend calls me and says, "Listen, there's this company out of Sweden, and they're looking for somebody to do a voiceover on an industrial video in English. Are you interested?" I was like, "Sure." Because what I said to you before, I say yes. Part of my philosophy in life is I say yes until I have to say no. And so I say yes, and they put me on email contact, and the guy goes, "No, it's not a video. It's not an industrial video. I'm looking to create a team to do corporate training in the United States and Puerto Rico. Are you interested?" And again, I said yes.
Sure.
So I keep going, and I'm on this email chain, and suddenly they're like, "We need dates. We need you to come to Sweden for a week for training." So I'm like, okay. So now I called my friend who introduced me, put me into this world, and I'm like, "Hey, listen, who are these people? Have you worked with them before? They want me to go to Sweden." They're like, "What the hell?" And he goes, "Vincent, it's Richard from Richard and Frank." And I was like, oh my God. Turns out Richard was a guy that I worked with 11 years ago. who has a corporate training company in Austria and his partner in Sweden.
Right.
And so when it was time to create an American team, I was his number one choice
that's
because of
amazing.
the way that I was able to work with him, and I was able to get him to get in touch with himself and break out of his kind of like shell in such a smooth way.
Wow, that's so cool.
And it's one of those stories of like, just show up
Yeah.
and do what you're supposed to do, dude.
Yeah, you don't know. You don't know
Quit
what'll
the
happen.
agenda.
Yeah,
Stop the
yeah,
agenda. You know, just like
Totally.
do your job.
Yeah.
So that's how it happened.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What is your concept of a higher power? Is it?
My concept of a higher power is it's personal, and it has nothing to do with an entity or a being or anything other than the oneness of the universe.
Right.
The ability that I have to tap into truth, the ability that I have to tap into courage and willingness and
Right.
service, all things that are good in my life. I'll share one more experience with you. I think I was 18 months sober, 17 months sober when I booked Anaconda, and we shot in Brazil. And we were in Brazil. We were there for 8 weeks.
Who directed that?
Julio Josa, Luis Josa, Lucho Josa. And so we were in the Rio Negro. We were doing all the outdoor scenes. We were shooting during the day, and we would take this boat ride into the Rio Negro every morning, and then we work all day, and then we ride back
Right.
during sunset. And
Yeah.
during sunset, Eric Stolz and Jennifer Lopez and I used to always sit on the very top because we loved the view.
Sure.
It was the sunset, it was the foliage, it was all the colors, it was the jungle, it was tribes walking on the sides.
Yeah, amazing.
And in that, I was searching for a higher power. And that was the what broke it for me in terms of understanding that there's an equality and a oneness that I was never really, I never
Right.
had access to. And I
interesting.
started to realize that there is no difference between the sky and the sun and the water and the jungle and the tribes and me and everything, that there's something that sort of like it's all of us, has created all of us and created me as well. And that my journey, that's how I started to
Sure.
seek a different
Yeah,
higher
yeah.
power. My mom died 4 years ago. And once my mom passed away 4 years ago, I had another deeper access to connection to a higher power in regards to taking responsibility for self. And how that manifested itself and continues to is, like I said earlier, I'm responsible for all things Vincent. And I understood very clearly that when I was born, when we're all born, we're born pure and empty in a way, with nothing, either full or empty, whichever
Right.
you want to choose
Sure.
it. And so from that moment of birth, there's the nurse and the doctor and the mom and the dad and friends and family and school and economic situations
Sure.
and politics and religion and all of these things that were put on me that are not mine, dude.
Right.
That shit is not mine.
Totally.
I wasn't born with any of that, right? So I understood 4 years ago that my journey continues to be about getting rid of all that.
Wow.
Getting rid of all the stuff that was put on me, beliefs, idea, historical events, all that
Sure.
shit that was put on me that is not mine. And to get in touch, find out what I want, what is me, what makes Vincent Vincent. And so that's as spiritual as it gets for me.
Yeah.
You know, every morning when I wake up, the only thing I say is, please God, allow me to stay sober and not hurt myself or anyone in the process of the 24 hours. And to
Right.
me, that's what spirituality is. If I can get through 24 hours without hurting you or me,
Right.
I'm good. And then if on top of that, I can help
Right.
you along the way,
Sure.
then I'm fucking like, that's like graduate program spirituality.
Right.
To me, it doesn't have to be more than that.
Yeah.
For me, a higher power and a reliance on it doesn't have to be more than that.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and that's the beauty of sobriety, that it allows me, it encourages me to find it, to make it my own. It has to do with yours or what I read or what I saw in a movie or what you told me. It's like, my journey is mine, dude. What is mine? What is my relationship to a power greater than myself? It's a beautiful journey. It's one that excites me and keeps me going.
Awesome. Well, Vincent, thanks so much for coming in and doing this, man.
You're welcome.
Amazing.
I think this is
really
great.
Cool.
Thanks,
cool.
man. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Hey, so if you've been enjoying this podcast, you can head over to my Patreon page and feel completely free to support the show with a modest contribution at www.patreon.com/thedrunkalogs. The Drunkalogs cover art is designed and created by John DeManil, and the Drunkalogs theme song is composed and performed by Stephen Stout. I am Nick Morton.